Hi, I'm Kaleea, and this is Steve. Steve, what are we talking about today?
Hey, Kaleea, I thought we'd talk about radical love today because we did a podcast called Radical Hospitality.
Yeah.
And I had several people comment to me about the podcast. So I thought, hey, let's do another one.
Yeah. That's cool. We could do like a radical series maybe.
We could, yeah. We could even do Radical Kaleea.
We could.
But that wouldn't fit very well, would it? Okay.
No, I'd rather not. Okay. All right, Steve, so what's radical love?
Yeah, that's a good question because I was thinking today that there are 4 Greek words for love. And I think you know this. Do you remember what the 4 Greek words are?
Agape, philos, storge, and eros.
Right. Excellent. And 2 of those are found in the New Testament and 2 are not. Do you know which?
And those are agape and philos, or agape and storge?
No, agape and philos is found in the New Testament.
Okay.
So agape means unconditional love and philos means brotherly love, like the love between friends. Good friendship love. Yeah, city of Philadelphia.
Okay.
Yeah, the joke there is the pollution don't get you, the criminals will.
Oh my gosh.
You've never heard that joke?
I've never heard that.
I've heard that joke before. Anyway,
I apologize if you're from Philly.
Although you probably would say it's true. You're from Philly because that's who I heard it from, somebody from Philadelphia. But so, and the other 2 are storge, which is what kind of love is that?
Storge is familial love, correct?
Yes.
Like the love you have between siblings, parents.
Yeah, parents and a child. Yeah. And eros is love between a husband and wife. And we get the English word erotic from it as well. So eros and storge are not found in the New Testament, but agape is found a lot.
Okay.
And it's only used of God's love for people.
Okay.
And philos is used of, whenever Paul says brotherly love or love one another, it's going to be philos.
Okay.
Generally speaking.
Interesting.
Yeah, so those words are pretty important because in the Greek world, in the first century in which Paul wrote his letters or Jesus lived, people looked down upon the word agape.
Wow.
Because they thought it was...
Why?
Well, because they were rough and tough and unconditional love.
Unconditional love was not...
It wasn't valued.
A symbol of masculinity or... Huh.
Yeah,
interesting.
It wasn't used by anybody. They just never thought of it in those terms. So Paul made that word more popular.
Wow.
I think that would be accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you've heard of C.S. Lewis?
I have.
Yeah, so he wrote the book called The 4 Loves.
Okay.
And
about the 4 Greek words.
Yeah, about the 4 Greek words.
Okay.
In fact, you can go on YouTube. I brought it up.
Okay.
And you can hear his voice.
Cool.
So he's reading from his book. And he's very British. So when he pronounces the word agape, he says agape.
Agape. Is that a British way of saying agape?
I guess. Maybe we say it wrong.
Maybe
it is agape.
Yeah, I don't know.
It just kind of depends. So
yeah.
So if we ask the question, what is radical love? What can you think of examples from the Bible about?
Yeah, I mean, I would say radical love is unconditional love, agape love, and I think the Bible has plenty of these examples. Obviously, the low-hanging fruit is Jesus dying on the cross unconditionally for our salvation, even knowing that we would continue to sin, and that people even wouldn't accept him after his crucifixion. There are other examples of agape, like the relationship between Ruth and Naomi, and Ruth staying with her mother-in-law after her husband died and sewing into that relationship, and then eventually
Why don't you expand on that just a little bit? Because I know we have a 13-year-old that listens to all our podcasts. Tell us a little bit more of the story of Ruth.
Yeah, so basically Ruth was married to this guy who was Naomi's son, and her son ends up dying. And I think she has a sister-in-law as well whose husband also dies. So now Naomi is this widow without children anymore, and her sons were kind of the pride of her life. And so Ruth decides to stay with her mother-in-law while the sister-in-law ends up leaving, and Ruth decides that she's going to stay and be with her mother-in-law because she knows that she's alone. And so she sews into that relationship, and she takes care of the household financially and socially. And then eventually she finds someone else, Boaz, who is her her dead husband's relative, right? Yeah. And then they end up being together. But before that happened, she spends a lot of time in her mother-in-law's household, tending to her and taking care of her.
What I think is so fascinating about that story, my characters mix. Ruth loves her mother-in-law Naomi so much that she stays with her.
She stays with her.
Takes care of her.
Yeah, and takes care of her, even though she could have left and maybe have found another husband at that point, but spends her time with her mother-in-law.
Yeah, that's
unlike the sister-in-law who leaves.
Yeah, do you remember the sister-in-law's name?
No, what is it?
It's actually Oprah.
Oprah.
But
okay.
it's Orpah.
Orpah.
Yeah. Oprah Winfrey got her name from that character.
Oh, did she really?
Well, they accidentally switched the letters around to hear her tell the story that mispronounced her name.
Yeah.
That didn't quite match the biblical spelling.
Yeah,
anyway.
Orpah. Huh. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So, Ruth. So I thought of one from the Old Testament, and that was Hosea, the prophet, and Gomer.
This is a great example, Steve. How I wish I came up with it.
I know. I offered it to you. You said, no, I want to use Ruth. So I'll read the first verse of the book of Hosea, which says, when the Lord first spoke through Hosea, he said to him, go marry a prostitute who will bear illegitimate children conceived through prostitution, because the nation continually commits spiritual prostitution by turning away from the Lord.
Yeah.
So, crazy story, right?
It is.
I'm just trying to put myself in Hosea's shoes. It'd be difficult.
Yeah.
God tells him, hey, you can correct me if I kind of get the story a little mixed up, but I love the people of Israel so much, even though they're spiritually cheating on me.
Yeah.
I love them so much that I'm going to stay committed to them. And to show you this example, my prophet Hosea is going to marry a prostitute who cheats on him and has children outside
of their marriage.
Right?
Yeah.
And as a visual example of how much I love you in spite of your spiritual, if I could put it that way, worshiping idols. I guess I call it spiritual adultery.
Yeah, or idolatry.
Idolatry,
Yeah. It's a crazy story.
That's some radical love that God has for the people of Israel.
It is radical love, and then radical love for Hosea to be obedient to God, right?
Oh,
yeah.
Exactly.
Could you imagine? Yeah.
Yeah. He's the opposite of Jonah when God tells Jonah, go to the people in Nineveh.
Right. Yeah. Instead of running away from the call, he runs to it, even though it's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think this whole radical love thing, I know so many examples, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. In Scripture. And certainly, as you brought up, the cross of Christ going to his death and resurrection on our behalf. It just feels like to me that old saying, God loves those who don't love him back. And that's what I read in Hosea.
It's so true. Yeah. Pursues people recklessly and relentlessly despite their own affections. Yeah.
So when we think of us today, you and me, and there are people in our lives or in our community, and we go, oh, I want to love that other person, but they don't love us back. They may even hate us.
They might, yeah.
How does that work, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think we continue to love even though people don't want to be loved by us. And I think a great way that we do that as a church is partnering with the HIV Alliance. Even though we don't necessarily align all of our values with them, we still go out of our way to take care and donate and partner to make sure that those people are taken care of. And so I think radical love means loving others, like you said, when they don't love you back, or when you disagree with them, or when there's some kind of a barrier, and still superseding that barrier and saying, hey, I care about you. What can I do to serve you?
Right. And it would seem to me that people, if on a human level, if people don't respond to my love for them, then we just kind of give up.
Yeah.
Typically, right?
Yeah, like whatever. Kick rocks, right?
Yeah. Or write them off or something like that.
Yeah, we do that. So let me ask you, what do you think Jesus means when he says don't cast pearls to swine or shake the dust from your feet when you do try to radically love somebody and then there's opposition?
It seems like to me those biblical phrases, he's referencing some of the Jewish leaders and people who were so hard-hearted that there was nothing I could do or the disciples could do to soften their hearts.
Reach them.
Yeah. So only God can do that.
Right.
That's what I would say. And therefore, sometimes maybe we run into people who are so hard-hearted that we say, okay, I'm going to have to let God work on them before I do anything else.
Yeah, that's a hard tension.
So do you find that true, that you run into people who are so hard-hearted?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that people are hard-hearted, but then I also don't necessarily feel like it's within my judgment to make that call. Like, that's Jesus saying that, right? But then I feel like we could use that easily as a cop-out of, well, that person just doesn't want to listen, so I'm going to move along. Maybe before our mission is done to that person. So I think it's a hard tension, because you obviously don't want to overstep boundaries or continue to push somebody, because eventually you could push them away. You could push them off a ledge with your radical love for them. But then also knowing that, like, the second there's opposition or adversity with another person isn't the opportunity to run away either. And so figuring out where that balance is important.
Yeah. I was just trying to think through as you were talking that once in a while, I mean, maybe less than 5 times in my Christian life, I've run into people who are so hostile, so
what does it look
and
like?
angry that it just feels like pretty useless to continue the conversation. But that is so rare, I think. Yeah. But we don't want to use that as an excuse to give up, like you said.
Right. Yeah. We don't. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in what ways have you experienced God's radical love just in your life? Can you think of an example? Yeah,
I mean, I would say, I don't want to keep going back to salvation, but it's true. I think just my experience and encounters with the Lord when I was young, or I'm still young, but when I was younger and I gave my life to Christ, I think are examples of his radical love. And I mean, something we're talking about this week, I don't want to give away too much, but just about feeling like you're born on the wrong side of the tracks and feeling like God doesn't necessarily reach everybody. And so having God reach me and meet me where I was when I was a teenager and I was really struggling and I was in foster care, and seeing God intervene in those moments and say, hey, like, you're valuable, you're just as valuable as any other person to me. I experienced God's radical love in him intervening in moments where I felt like he wouldn't be.
How old were you when you became a Christian?
I was baptized when I was 9 years old. I didn't start pursuing relationship with Jesus, I wouldn't say, until I was like 13, 14.
Okay.
Yeah.
It would seem like to me that sometimes there's somebody who radically loves us before we experience God's radical love. Yeah. Was that true for you?
Yeah. I mean, I started going to church. Me and my sister would walk ourselves to church when we were 13. When I was 13, she was 17 at the time. And we ended up joining a summer internship at a youth group. And in that summer internship, we had pastors come alongside us and really get their hands dirty and involved with our lives in a way that I had never experienced before in a church.
Yeah, I was just thinking that after my father died, so I'm 15 and kind of just lack guidance, and I'm angry and probably have emotions I don't even remember. Yeah. Or I couldn't figure out at the time. And, I started going to a youth group, and there were some youth leaders that I thought were probably very patient and loving toward me, even though I was somewhat a smart aleck.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So I think that they're very patient with me. Yeah. So I think that was that was instrumental in my life, to have people come alongside who accepted me and loved me in spite of mine.
In spite of where you were.
In spite of where I was.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah. I just think this whole radical love thing is something that we can practice individually as believers, but also as a church, we need to be thinking that way. Yeah. So what are some practical ways that we can radically love people? Well, gosh, I can think of some. Here's some ways. I intentionally go and talk to the barista where I get my Starbucks coffee. Yeah. Yeah. And even though that person probably didn't think I do, but I always talk to them. I know her name. I know she has kids. I know she likes to go camping. She knows a few things about me. She knows I'm a pastor. We have mutual friends in common. So I'm always trying to go out of my way to have those kind of conversations. Yeah. And hopefully maybe someday it'll be a little bit more than that. Right. Yeah. Or if I say, hey, my neighbor needs some help, and I'm going to climb on his roof and clean his gutters.
Yeah. That's love.
Yeah. Or there's something like that.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's sending a note to somebody.
Yeah.
No one gets handwritten notes anymore. When's the last time you got a handwritten note?
I can't remember.
Yeah, see, it shocks you if you get one, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Usually it's an email. But then when I get a handwritten, I go, oh, they put some time into this.
Yeah, they thought about me. Wow.
It just wasn't a quick email kind of thing.
Yeah, that's
so
awesome.
How about you? How would you answer your own question?
Well, I was just gonna say, as you were talking, I think a big part of being able to do those things is building margin in your life to do them, because a lot of the times, I know specifically for me, it's so easy to feel like I need to get from point A to point B, and life is such a rush, and so you don't always have the time to have those conversations. And so being intentional about, if I need to get up 45 minutes earlier so that I can have a conversation with my barista, or I can be outside when I see my neighbor working on his lawn or her lawn, then I need to do that. And so I think a lot of it comes down to, are people valuable enough for me to take time out of my day to meet with them?
Yeah, I think that's excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, am I going to sacrifice my time to help develop relationships with people?
Yeah.
Right. So one of the ways that I tried to practice that early on in my life was I'd borrow everything I could from my neighbors.
I love that.
It's true. So I'd go borrow a ladder. I'd go borrow a hammer. Mary go, you have a hammer. I said, well, I wanted to talk to them.
I want their hammer.
And so I'd borrow whatever and make sure I brought it back timely.
Yeah.
And if it needed to be cleaned up, I made sure I washed it. That it just went back better than it was.
Yeah.
And it just enabled those kind of conversations to happen.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I want to ask you, what do you have to say to a generation that is socially anxious and depressed and feels like they don't know how to talk to people or radically love people or build margin and time in their lives to connect?
Well, part of me wants to say,
get up and do it anyway.
Get up and do it anyway.
Yeah.
Right. But maybe that's not overly helpful, but there is a part of that, right? You gotta just do it. Yeah. In some way or fashion, and figure out how to do that. Yeah. I mean, Jesus did that in many ways. Yeah. Whether it was somebody coming up to him, like the rich young ruler came up to him and want to have a conversation, or he sought out somebody else to have a conversation with them, like the in John chapter 5, the lame man at the pool, or in other contexts where he's talking to people and those conversations happen. So we got to figure out ways to do that, right? Because if you want to share the gospel, and the gospel of grace, the gospel of love, then we have to get out and talk. Yeah. Talk. And social media isn't maybe the best place to
do all of that.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. I think social media is a helpful tool in spreading the gospel.
I know you do,
but no, I get what you're saying. You need to have personable relationships with people. Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. I guess I wonder about people who use the excuse of, well, I don't have to explicitly share the gospel with people. They see it in my actions. They see it when I smile at the barista or when I wave at the barista, and so I don't have to have these explicit and sometimes uncomfortable conversations with people about Jesus. What do you say? What do you say to that?
I don't like that.
Yeah.
So, and here's why, because they'll only understand that you're a good person and you're nice to people.
That's good.
And if you never have the conversation, then they'll never know why you do those things.
Yeah.
So you have to have at least some sort of conversation that's spiritual in nature. Otherwise, people will just think, well, they're just a nice person. Yeah. And being nice is a good thing, which I agree it's a good thing. Yeah. But the best thing is a relationship with the God who created you. So the person who quotes to me Francis of Assisi, preach the gospel at all times, if necessary, use words. I don't like that. Yeah. Because
faith comes by hearing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Hearing the word of God.
Yeah. So I struggle with that. I just don't think that's a good...
Right. A good tactic.
A good tactic.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a good strategy to use.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I hear that a lot. That's why I asked. I hear, people will know that I love Jesus because I'm a good sportsman, or I'm nice to my teacher, or I hold doors open. You know what I mean? But I like what you said about they'll only know you're a good person. They'll know that you're a good Samaritan, but they won't know why that is.
I do believe that when we love people, it opens the door to the gospel. But if you never walk through that door, then why?
Yeah.
Why? Right? So there's an old saying that goes, good works opens the doors to the good news. And if you never get to the good news, then you're pretty much stuck at being
You're just standing at the door.
You stand at the door. You're just stuck at being a good person.
Yeah. Well, that's really good.
So let me ask you, what do you think churches can do collectively to practice radical love? We already mentioned one thing that we do together.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that churches should be engaging in active conversations with people who believe differently than them, maybe even on a podcast. But just looking to have conversations with people that the world wouldn't think that we'd be willing to have conversations with. That means talking to an organization that we don't agree with, or having a conversation with somebody from a community that we don't necessarily align our values with. And I think having conversations with people who are different than you often opens the door to relationship. And a lot of the times people aren't even willing to give people who believe or look differently than them the time of day. And so as churches, looking for those opportunities, seeking them out intentionally.
Right. I would say, I think we have to seek them out intentionally, deliberately. Yeah. So I like the saying when we say we love people in our church. Yeah. We love people in our community. We love our community. We love our world. If we're going to love our community well, I think there are things that we can do. The teaming up with the public school and being helpful over there, I think is a great way to open that door and to show love, because sometimes they feel like churches are the adversary. Right. Yeah, and I think that can happen in several ways where, it's perceived anyway by the community that churches are against the community. And that can happen in public school. I think it can also happen in this whole homeless issue, which is super complicated, and I get that. Yeah. But I do think churches can play a significant role in the homeless issue. And I think the role they can play is developing friendships with those who are homeless. And here's what I mean by that. The government gives lots of money to homelessness, but they don't provide relational resources. The church has lots of relational resources. Yeah, that's true. So the person who lives in their car and works at a retail store, but they are still living out of their car, they need some relational support, emotional support. Yeah. And maybe they burned that with their family members, and that's not an option at this time. Yeah. And certainly the church can come alongside people who are hurting and the working poor or the homeless. Yeah. Homeless thing. So I think that's one way. Yeah, I think so too. Is there anything to be said about like political activism? I know that you've met with the mayor a few times, right, of Eugene, or... I have in the past. I actually just met with a little meeting with a city council person. Yeah, or cool. 5 of us, and talked about homeless issues, and that was very... Yeah, so encouraging church leaders to be a part of those conversations as well. Yeah, because then the city knows that the church also cares, right? Yeah, exactly. And in our community, there's Everywhere Church, which is a ministry. Maybe the term church isn't quite accurate in what they do, but they provide lots of housing for people who are homeless, and people who are in those Everywhere Church community. It feels like a community, a church to them. Yeah, yeah, and that's awesome. And I think they're doing good work here, and we should have Gabe on our podcast sometime who runs that. That would be good. Yeah, that would be super cool. Yeah. Cool. So radical love is something that I think once a person feels love from somebody else, they're more open to feeling the love of God. Love of God. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Any last thoughts about... Go practice radical love. Okay, sounds good. Yeah. Hey, thanks for listening to the podcast. I'm Kaleea. And I'm Steve. Bye.